Hello everyone and welcome back to the video. This is going to be my ultimate guide to Koreans for Age of Empires 2. And if you guys are not familiar with the series, I basically go ahead and take one civilization every week and break it down to you guys, let you guys know the strategies you want to go for, the kind of units that they're good with, the maps that they're strong on, and kind of an overall, kind of a nice overview for the civilization, a nice overall guide that you guys can watch and hopefully learn and master one of these civs. And today we're going to be tackling the Koreans. Let's hop right in and check it out. Alright, the cool thing about the Koreans right off the bat here is that they're one of the original civilizations of the base game Age of Kings, which is awesome. And although they've went through a lot of changes over the years, their kind of like identity remains quite similar to their original identity, which is a really cool thing to see. So it's actually a civilization that's quite intact with its original design. And you know, if you guys aren't familiar with what the Koreans are in general, they're basically just, you know, an archer, tower, and a naval civilization for the most part. And they can do a lot of cool things with their slow pushes and their siege as well. So they have a nice kind of archer, siege, and tower, or like structure kind of vibe to the civilization. And just to give you guys a nice little overview, we're gonna go ahead and jump into the tech tree and see what the civilization has to offer in terms of bonuses and in terms of technologies. So here we are. The Koreans are described as a defensive and a naval civilization. Their bonuses are as follows. First one is that the villagers have +3 line of sight. This might seem like it's not the biggest of deals, but it's actually a very nice bonus in my opinion. It helps mostly on nomadic maps, or like nomad type starts, where you start with no town center and you have to find a place that will be suitable for a town center. The extra line of sight on the villagers helps a ton in this case because it lets you scout more of the map and find that perfect location that much quicker. However, even on regular maps, this bonus is quite nice. For example, if you want to go for a tower rush, your villagers can run forward and they see more of the map, which is a very big advantage. And also just being able to find the resources around your base quite quickly with the villagers, and also spotting raids earlier. This bonus is very flexible, and although it doesn't seem like much, it's not one to be underestimated. The next bonus is quite straightforward. Stone miners work 20% faster. Nice little boost to the stone mining, pretty solid there. And then we have tower upgrades are free, but you need chemistry to get bomber tower upgrade, but that bomber tower upgrade will be free. So once you get chemistry, right away you're going to have bomber towers available, which is really cool. This is a great bonus. It helps in all points of the game. Guard tower, spike, and castage is very strong. And of course, having keeps and bomber towers in Imperial Age without having to upgrade them is a pretty solid bonus in a lot of cases. Next, you have archer armor upgrades are free. So a lot of free things coming your way if you're playing as the Koreans. This is a nice bonus to help with your military. Kind of pushes you towards archers early on, which is what the Civ wants to go for as well. And then military units, except siege weapons, cost -20% wood. This also works for ships. And this is why I say that Koreans are a very solid naval civilization here. They've got two unique units. They've got the war wagon, which counts as a cavalry archer. They've also got the turtle ship, which comes out from the dock, and we'll talk about these a little bit later on in the tech tree analysis. Their unique techs are Yip Song, which gives watchtowers, guard towers, and keeps +2 range. This does not affect bomber towers. And then they have Shin Kishon, hopefully I pronounced that right, which gives Mangonel Line an extra range, which makes your siege onagers actually go up to 10 range once you have this and siege engineers research, which is very, very strong, of course. And then finally, their team bonus is that Mangonel Line minimum range is reduced. It makes their mangonels able to fire very close to themselves, which helps a lot against melee and cavalry that run in too close. And this also helps as well in late game with your siege onagers. Keep in mind, it is a team bonus, but it does apply to you even in a 1v1. All right, those are the bonuses. Let's take a look at the technologies available just to know what kind of units we could go for and what do we have available. So starting off with the archery range, which is going to be your main tool. We've got Arbalest, hand cannoneer, heavy cav archers all there with thumb ring, but we are missing Parthian tactics, which is hitting the cavalry archers a little bit. Going on now to the barracks, we've got champion and halberdier, supplies, arson as well, all in there. So as you can see, quite a nice setup here with the archery range and the barracks, but the downsides start coming up in the stable. We do have hussars, but we're missing bloodlines, and we don't have paladin, and we're missing a lot of upgrades in the blacksmith for the stable. So the stable for Koreans is really not the best. Not to say that you never use it. Hussars in late game can be a nice no gold option, and knights in Castle Age, couple knights to pick up some siege units or to support your army is never really a bad idea. But stable, don't commit to this long term. You're missing too many upgrades for it to be too powerful. Moving on now to the siege workshop, they've got cap ram, which is okay, but they have siege onager, which we've talked about with extra range, and then the bombard cannon as well, which is in there. No heavy scorpion though, so your main siege is going to be bombard cannon and onager for the most part. Moving on to the blacksmith, you've got everything except the blast furnace upgrade, which is the attack for infantry and cavalry, and the plate barding armor, which is the armor for the cavalry. So cavalry is very weak for Koreans. It's just a fact, especially in late game, and their infantry is going to be pretty decent. decent. I mean, you get all the armor, but you're just missing 2 attack, which comes up sometimes, but it's not the end of the world. You can still go halves and champions into a decent success with Koreans. Their dock is actually very stacked. They've got all the upgrades, and they even have a unique warship, which is the turtle ship. However, I will mention first that they are missing the demolition line, so you can't even make a demolition ship in feudal age, so keep that in mind when going for the Koreans. But it's really not that big a drawback because war galleys and fire ships are pretty good most of the time, and you also can make use of the unique unit, which is the turtle ship. It's very expensive and very slow, but it does massive damage, and it also does splash damage. So against big groups of ships, turtle ship will do a lot of damage, and turtle ships also do pretty good work against buildings and units on land. So if you ever get a turtle ship that's close to the shore, you can destroy your opponent's villagers, for example, or any unit that he has running by, because 50 base attack is no joke. Moving on now to the university. The university is actually very stacked for the Koreans. It's very simple actually. They get all the upgrades from the university. They even get the guard tower and keep upgrades for free, as well as the bomber tower upgrade once you get chemistry. So the university is amazing, and as far as structures go, Koreans are amazing both offensively and defensively. With those towers with extra range and free upgrades, you're able to take ground fast, and it's just a really nice civilization overall there when it comes to towering up and defending yourself. Now talking about the war wagon a little bit. War wagon is quite expensive at 125 wood and 60 gold. Keep in mind though, you do have the wood discount, so it's not going to cost you 125 wood in game. It's going to cost you 20% less than that, but of course 60 gold is still a pretty steep cost. War wagons are actually insane against archer units. They have a ton of pierce armor, a ton of health, so they're very tanky. They do get somewhat countered by skirms. Skirms do get the bonus damage against them, but it's really not the worst thing in the world because war wagons have a ton of HP and they do have quite a high damage, so you're able to easily take out skirms as well. The biggest weakness for the wagons, in my opinion, is maybe mass cavalry and also monks, because monks, it's a very extensive unit. If you start getting the war wagon converted, it could get a bit messy. But the best application for the war wagon is just getting it out in Castle Age and just being an absolute alpha with it. Run under town centers. You have got a ton of pierce armor. You get the archer upgrades for free, so wagons are going to be extremely tanky from the get-go. But of course, if you do go for the wagon, keep in mind that thumb ring and husbandry affect this unit because it counts as a cav archer. Moving right along now, you're missing hoardings and you're missing sappers, but you know, those are not really the most important upgrades in most games. Your monastery though is not going to be the most impressive. No redemption. You do get block printing, but no heresy, no illumination, no atonement. So you're missing a few upgrades, but you do have block printing and sanctity. So monks in late game are going to be decent, and herbal medicine is there to heal your wagons in late game if that's the angle you want to go for. And as far as economy upgrades, you get everything except crop rotation, which is fair enough. Alright, now that we've taken a look a little bit around the tech tree for Koreans, you now know the different options they have. Let's think about the civilization from a more practical sense and assess their strengths and weaknesses. Well, right off the bat, I can tell you that their strength is going to be in their archer play from the early game. You're getting a lot of savings with the less wood cost for these archers and skirmishers, and you're also getting the archer armor for free right off the bat. This gives you an incredibly strong archer rush because not only do your archers come out really strong, but if you want to make a switch into skirmishers, having the armor upgrade right away is absolutely insane for the skirmisher. So being able to use both range units very effectively right from the get-go in feudal age is going to net you a really big advantage in most cases right from the early game with Koreans. So I highly recommend just kind of streamlining your strategy into going for archers. The reason why I think that archer play is really good with Koreans as well is that it kind of sets you up perfectly to go for towers, both to defend your base and to attack as well. Think about it logically. If you're playing with cavalry and your main play is to raid, going for towers forward doesn't really make sense because you're not trying to hold down a position. You're trying to just raid, hit and run, and then split up the enemy's defenses. Whereas with an archer push, with an archer and siege push, for example, you can only really fight in one spot. You can move around a little bit, of course, but you're not going to be running around rampaging the enemy bases. You're going to be focusing mainly on one spot, and this is where forward guard towers can really shine, holding down a position, locking down a hill, and pushing from there. So that's kind of where going archers helps a lot with the Koreans and gives you their main strengths all available in terms of like the towers, the free upgrades, the cheaper units, all their strengths coming in with kind of one strategy. Really smooth, really streamlined through that early game feudal age, castle age as well. In my opinion, one of the biggest strengths for Koreans is the fact that you're able to open archers and then transition into the war wagon and castle age, which benefits from the same upgrades that you were using for those archers. So it's very classic to go for like archer opening and then also switch into war wagon, and all you need to get is really the bodkin arrow because you get the free armor upgrades and you already got fletching from feudal age. So their unique unit just kind of meshes right in there with that archer strategy that in my opinion is so strong with the Koreans. Koreans. I would highly recommend not wasting your time with too much cavalry with Koreans. I usually like to say stay flexible, try out different things with your civilization, but in my opinion with Koreans, you should mainly be trying to play with your archer range at all stages of that early game. I will say though, only use your stable if you need it, if you need to counter enemy skirmishers, or if you need a couple knights just to clear up some kind of weak feudal age units. But for the most part, try to stick to their archers. It's their biggest strength in that early game. Moving on now to the imperial age though, and kind of that late game. What is the main idea for Koreans? What is the main strength in late game? Well, the fact that they get the tower upgrades for free lets you control the map with towers. Both keeps and bomber towers will do the trick in a lot of cases, and being able to take away woodlands from your opponent while also being able to have that one push in the center of the map. This is a very unique quality to the Koreans. Other civilizations can do this, but they need to invest into tower upgrades, whereas the Koreans can just hold their one push, you know, arbalest plus halberdier on a hill with some siege like onagers and bomber cannon, and then also raid your opponent, or I say raid, but it's really just like deny woodlines, take some space from the map using their towers, which are very strong. So in my opinion, that's the biggest strength for Koreans going into the late game. But of course, it all stems from that archer play in the early game that lets you tech into war wagons whenever you want, and then also lets you go for siege pushes potentially and controlling the game with towers. Do not play Koreans if you're afraid of getting your hands dirty, because using towers both offensively and defensively is a key component to Koreans. Now, while they have a lot of strengths in that archer play, and they do have the option to go for some strong infantry here and there, or some decently strong infantry, their biggest weakness in my opinion is the lack of cavalry. Although I did tell you guys to skip over their stable in a lot of cases, this does actually play a big role for the civilization. It is a weakness, there's no going around it. Not having the option to go for strong cavalry in late game cuts you off from having a nice unit to raid with. I really struggle to find any unit that the Koreans can go for to raid the opponent for a cheap cost. Hussars are really lackluster because you're missing a lot of upgrades, and using wagons is just simply going to be a very expensive unit to use to raid, and while it's possible, it definitely leads to a lot of complications. So their biggest weakness is the fact that they lack a lot of upgrades into their cavalry line, and the fact that you don't have the option to raid your opponent in late game with a very cost-effective unit. Alright, let's talk about power specs now, and when the Koreans are going to be at the strongest compared to other civilizations. Now, it really goes without saying, but the fact that you get free upgrades both with your towers and with any of your archer units, your power specs will be every time you get to a new age. So every time you go from like Dark Age to Feudal Age, right away you have a power spike because you're able to get the free archer armor. So early Feudal Age would be somewhat of a power spike. You also get discounts on your archers. So right away, early Feudal Age, it's a pretty solid situation for Koreans. But I would say as well, Castle Age, you get guard tower for free, and you also get access to their mangonels, which have some bonuses associated to them, and you also get the second archer armor for free, which also impacts the skirmishers, so keep that in mind. It's all range units. And yeah, Koreans just really strong at the start of every age because of those free upgrades that they get. However, I will say that where they shine in terms of power spike is in post imp, getting access to siege onager with 10 range, and the fact that you get bomber tower keeps for free, plus really strong halberdier, arbalest, and bomber cannon composition. Their late game is their biggest power spike. So if the game tends to drag on with Koreans, you should really not worry. The one thing I will advise you though is to try to secure a few relics, because the lack of Hussar makes it so your trash options, and I say trash meaning a unit that costs no gold, your options are a bit limited because you have decently strong halberdiers, you have very strong skirmishers that are also quite cheap. So the halves, they're pretty cheap as well, getting that wood discount of course, but your Hussars are going to be quite lackluster. So make sure to secure a few relics to be able to use the powerful siege options in that late game. Alright, now we're going to move on to matchups. When would you want to play Koreans? What civs are they good against? And when should you not want to go for them? Well, in my opinion, Koreans are the best counter, or the best part about Koreans rather, is the fact that they're a good counter to archer civs. Not to say that Koreans can't play versus cavalry civs, but I think that Koreans do really well into archer civs. I'll tell you why. Right off the bat, you have good archers yourself, so that's always an option, but you also have amazing skirmishers right off the bat, with that free armor being one of the most important upgrades for skirmishers, making them incredibly tanky to counter any archer civ in the early game. And also the war wagon is a unit that excels against archers in general, and it forces most archer civs to be forced to play skirmishers, which is exactly what you want as a Korean player because your skirmishers are cheaper. So playing skirm on skirm, and you mix in a couple of strong mangonels and onagers, and all of a sudden it's looking like a fantastic situation for the Korean player. So in my opinion, any archer civ Koreans will be a great counter to. And like I said, it's not to say they can't play against cavalry civs, but cavalry civs tend to want to play skirmishers because they can play skirm knight composition, which is actually quite powerful, and it can get a little bit tricky if you're facing something like that as the Koreans. So, and especially going to late game, playing against like Paladin plus skirms, plus some whatever they want to go for, maybe some monks or something to counter any wagons or siege that you have, and that's where it gets complicated. So just as a general rule for the matchups for Koreans, you're really good into archer civs, but you're really mediocre versus cavalry civs. And that's, in my opinion, the best way to put it. Alright, now moving on to the maps. What would you want to play on if you're playing as the Koreans? The best maps for the Koreans are actually the closed maps, the ones that have a slow start and that usually tend to go for the late game. Maps that come to mind are Black Forest, Arena, Hideout. Koreans would be amazing on those style of maps simply because they have amazing compositions if you want to secure ground. We already talked about the towers. The Siege Onager with 10 range are fantastic. Bomber cannons with Siege Engineer. Monks that are okay. They do get the block printing technology. So Koreans are fantastic on those closed maps because they get a death ball composition with wagons, monks, Siege Onagers, towers, and it just feels so hard to play against that. So highly recommend you play Koreans on closed maps. And on open maps, they're not terrible, but sometimes they struggle a little bit with that mobility in that late game, as I mentioned earlier. One last thing I'll mention as well when we're talking about maps is that Koreans are a fantastic water civ. So playing Koreans on any water map or hybrid map tends to be a pretty good idea in a lot of cases as well. And keep in mind the turtle ship is really good on close quarter water fight. On big water maps like Team Islands and stuff, turtle ships are not going to be amazing, so you just probably stick to galleons for the most part. But if it's close quarter fighting in terms of water battles, then going for turtle ships is going to be a great idea because they do quite well against ships with not a lot of place to run because they're pretty slow. Alright, that's going to do it for my ultimate guide to Koreans. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys learned something. And just to conclude here, Koreans reminds me as the perfect civilization to counter archer civs. And also it just does really well in general as a civilization to have a death ball push. So if either of those two things are interesting to you, then Koreans is definitely the civilization for you. Thanks for watching the video, guys. Make sure to drop a like, comment, and subscribe to support me on YouTube. I read all my comments, so feel free to hit me up and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care and peace.